everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts, Will and myself and Samantha, who just breathtakingly made it in the nick of time on 95.
Yes,
95
story
was,
of my life.
Was chaos. Yeah, sorry. You're doing great, though.
My friends call me the late, great Samantha Love.
There you go.
Late?
The late, great.
Yikes.
Some ways.
But at any rate, we have an exciting podcast in store for you today because we have a special guest who's visiting us. He's in Asheville, North Carolina, joining us via Zoom, Mr. Mark Patterson. And I want to say a few words about him before we start delving in. He's a fascinating guy. He is a sound medium who has presented on sound healing at events and conferences all throughout the world. He channels pure tones, and he's going to talk to us about that and probably maybe even give us a little sample.
Absolutely.
He is a graduate of New Mexico State Las Cruces. And without further ado, we're going to dive right in with the most fascinating thing, I think, so far, and that is your NDE at the age of 16. First, if you want to introduce anything else about yourself, and then jump into that topic.
Yeah, sure. My name is Mark Patterson, and I crossed over at the age of 16. I kind of want to backtrack a little bit, though, with my childhood and get to why that happened in the manner that it happened. So as a child, I was very psychic and very intuitive, and I always saw lights and auras and things around people, and I always knew stuff about people that I wasn't supposed to know. And unfortunately, I did not receive a lot of praise for the things that I was sharing with people. In fact, I was often ridiculed and teased. Don't talk about that. Why do you know that? Don't speak of that. And of course, my father, who was a holy roller, always told me that I was possessed. So I think what happens is that, and I've shared the story so many times over the years, I've heard from other people my age who kind of went through the same thing, that you get overwhelmed, you get so bombarded with information, data overload, being called overly sensitive, being called crazy, weird, that you tune it out and you shut down. And my way of shutting down was, by the time I was 14 years old, I was consuming alcohol at a pretty excessive rate. And so when I was 16 years old, I thought I'd be really cool one night. I was at a high school party at the Canterbury Inn in Coralville, Iowa, and I tried to impress my older friends by chugging a fifth of vodka, 4 beers, 2 glasses of wine, and 4 wine coolers in about a 90-minute time frame. So needless to say, I became unconscious. I was dead. There's no other way to say it. My body was in the bathroom floor of the hotel room. My skin had turned black and green. I was completely lifeless. And then all of a sudden, as anyone who's had a near-death experience will tell you, that when you initially leave your body, you're very scared because you're calling out to these kids that were just around you 90 minutes ago and going chug, 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 chug. And, your cries for help fall on deaf ears. And then I was greeted by my grandfather, Russell, who probably passed around the age of when I was 2 or 3. And I only have very glimmers of memories of him. And it's very common that if a grandparent passes when the grandchild is at a young age, they in turn become almost like a guardian to look over the grandchild. And I've heard this account many, many times. So then, of course, the light opened up, and if you ever listened, and in my dreams, much later, I've been taken to the celestial choir. The Bible calls it the Elohim. And the music is so angelic. It literally brings you to your knees. And the closest thing I can recall is when I went to Ireland in 2005, and there were two women, soprano and alto soprano, singing in the streets of Dublin. Their voices were angelic. There was about 30 or 40 people around them, and we were all on our knees because it just was so moving. And so you hear that, and then I was probably greeted by 7 angels. You ever see the movie Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, The City of the Clouds? So that's kind of the images that were coming to me. It was something similar to that. And there were 7 angels. They were all female in appearance, and they were about 12 to 14 feet tall each. And there was like a hologram of my life. This is kind of the holographic nature of the universe is very accurate. And they kind of, it's not that you're judged or you're condemned, but you kind of have a life review of what you need to work on and what your strengths were, and what are you doing and what is the plan. And of course my grandfather was in the room with me, and anytime that I was angry, resentful, or blamed other people, and of course that's all you kind of ever do when you're a teenager, I was only asked one question, and that question was, how does that relate to love? And everything in our life is an opportunity to express love, or the word forgiveness is forgiving. You're forgiving love. And on the opposite of that is forgetting. If you're always out for getting things, you are forgetting who you really are. And so then again, the sense of time is distorted when you're on the other side. So even though there was a time that elapsed, it was almost also like it's simultaneously. And when the angels are communicating to you on the other side, it's telepathic. And like you could have several beings communicating to you all at once, but you understand what each of them are saying to you. So it's just like those things on paper, and I posted this on the Galactic website, that if you look at it this way, there's one image. You look at it this way, there's another image. And you look at it another way, there's like 3 or 4 images, but it's all on one plane. Well, that's the nature of this reality, is that all the images are superimposed on one plane, and depending on your consciousness level determines how much of the reflection of light that you see back to you. That's why some people like me, I still see auras or things. It's not that this reality is an illusion. It's an illusion because you only see 2% of the light spectrum. Even though there's more light frequencies out there for us to see. So even though there are many beings talking to you at once, you can still distinguish them, even though it's going on at the same time. Just like those pictures, even though there's different realities to that picture, you can, they're all there at once in the same plane, so to speak. So then my grandfather Russell came to me and informed me that I was going home. And at that same time, there was a being in male appearance that was probably about 30 to 40 feet tall in appearance. Again, this is just so that you can understand kind of what, do I know if that's what happened? I believe that it was, but they relate to you in ways that you can understand so that you are not freaked out of your mind. And so then they proceeded in great detail to talk to me about sound, geometry, and the priesthood of Melchizedek. And then there was a kind of like a timeline of my life shown to me. And then that being that was 30 or 40 foot tall became an icosahedron and about the size of a volleyball, and entered my heart. And Mark came back and was awakened. We estimate that I was probably unconscious for about 22 minutes, if not completely dead altogether, around 22 minutes.
so many threads to pull on this one, but do you have any idea
Yeah.
who that 30-foot being was at this point now? Do you know?
So as we were talking before we got started, it was a walk-in. I believe that was related to the Melchizedek priesthood. But as I was mentioning to Allison earlier, that there's a book called Hands of Light by Barbara N. Brennan. And on page 262, it says that future lifetimes can be placed in the auric field at the beginning of birth and can be taken on at the completion of a lifetime if an individual so chooses. So it's almost like, in a sense, again, we are multidimensional aspects, and there's multidimensional aspects on the etheric plane, the angelic plane, the spiritual plane. And so the lifetime that I may have planned 5 lifetimes from now with this being, or parallel life, or however you want to call it, came back through time and entered my body when I was 16.
Wow.
And for some reason, that passage resonates really strong with me.
So I'm curious, how difficult or how challenging was your recovery on the human side? And what did your family and friends notice about this new Mark? I mean, was it obvious you were a different being?
So a couple of things. I was very quiet, and I'm still kind of a recluse. Well, when the first thing that I noticed was what reinforces and validates the idea that this being that was 30 or 40 foot that took over was that when I first came back into my body, and later the next day, the next 2 or 3 days, everyone looked about this big to me.
Wow.
And it was just really strange. Like, where am I at? What am I doing? And it took about 5 or 6 days for that walk-in to really integrate into Mark. So I became more withdrawn, because not only did, trying to numb out that sensitivity, that psychic stuff with alcohol, I became more psychic. I became more intuitive, and so I tried marijuana. And then shortly after, I crossed over and had my near-death experience. And I've told this story for years. I was up in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, with a family, and a really professional family, medical background, and all that stuff. And Peter was my best friend at the time, and we played on the same baseball team together. And one morning I went to Peter's mother and I said, "Look, you have to call your daughter right now and tell her not to come up. I mean, she can't come up." They were like, well, they'd been arguing. I go, no, you don't understand. She cannot be here. She can't be here. She just doesn't need to come up. And then later that night, I almost got angry. And I was like, look, you have to call your daughter now and tell her not to come up here. Well, they got really mad with me, and they sent me home on a Greyhound bus the next morning back to Iowa. Unfortunately, their daughter was killed in a car accident on the way up. And so again, my response was, I did what I was asked to do, and it failed. So I didn't want to hear the voices anymore. So I chose to turn to smoking marijuana for probably about 2 or 3 years every day. And then one morning I just woke up and I stopped. And I fully support marijuana, but I just haven't done it since I was 19.
Fascinating. And we're going to,
but yeah. So I did. I became more withdrawn, more, like, just, I show up, do what I do. And then I was not very social. I was very socially awkward, because when you're 16 and a male and you're intuitive, that's awkward, let alone. But when you start hearing voices, and I can get into more on that, what I was told. Again, it's like what's that?
I do want to do that, and we have a lot to talk about. I do want to mention, though, since we haven't brought up the subject of walk-ins to the audience, I just wanted to kind of give a brief definition of a walk-in traditionally, how we understand it. And that is when, for whatever reason, the body is completely viable, but the soul can't fulfill the mission that it originally intended with that body. So there will be an agreement between another soul that they do a swap.
That is correct.
And both of those souls have to agree, and they just do an immediate swap. And so sometimes you might notice, family might notice a difference in that. And it is fascinating. I had a client who's a friend of ours now, and she's a viewer of ours. Hey, Wendy. I don't think she'll mind if I mention that one of her first questions when she came to us for a session was, am I a walk-in? And I had never encountered one. And I was kind of like, yeah, sure. Because everybody thinks they're either a twin flame or a walk-in or whatever, because it's the fun thing. But she really was. And so I took the liberty of questioning her higher self. Her higher self is amazing, by the way. And we've done several sessions that she'll probably, I think she's put up on her website. So we'll link to that in the bottom if you want to check Wendy's YouTube channel. But her higher self told us all about the walk-in and how it works and what it's all about and why she needed to be a walk-in and stuff. So it's fascinating. So your experience of a walk-in was just very, very slightly different than perhaps traditionally.
Right. Yeah. With walk-ins, there's always an agreement, and the souls agree to the exchange. It's not like it's all pre-planned. That's my understanding before we incarnate here, that it's agreed to and it's all pre-planned and arranged. Yeah. And
so I'll have to ask, because I understood from her session that it can happen at any time during that human's path, that for whatever reason the soul says, hey,
you can walk in during the dream state. That is correct.
Yeah.
And sometimes a walk-in will completely change the person. They might even have different colored eyes. They will have a different personality.
Right.
Other times the walk-in, they're very similar energetically.
It's a very seamless process.
Seamless process. That's correct.
From one moment to the next. Yeah, and I would say that would be Wendy's case. It's a very seamless, moment.
Yeah.
At the moment.
So
that's
Mark,
true.
How long did it take you then to start to embrace your gifts finally? And what was the impetus for that?
To really embrace my gifts. So, again, several years ago, they did a show on History Channel or Discovery Channel, and they had 10 women that had near-death experiences, and they had 10 men that had near-death experiences. All 10 men didn't tell no one anything for 10 years. I didn't tell anyone anything. I maybe told two people, my best friend in Iowa and the girl that I was dating in Charleston back in 92 or 93. And that's it. I didn't say anything to anyone because it was I experienced weird stuff since I was a kid, but this was just way out there,
Yeah.
I didn't say anything to anyone.
So it's more common for men not to speak about it. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's correct. And so 10 years after this experience, and this is why I know what happened to me is valid. A woman that I never met, never spoke with before, it's real vague how she got a hold of my phone number, called me at 1:30 in the morning when no one really knew where I was at or what I was doing. I was in between Charleston and Iowa and, kind of floating around. And she described events from my childhood that I had told no one about. She described my near-death experience in verbatim about the Melchizedek priesthood, the 30 to 40 foot being that took over, sound healing and geometry. And just everything. And so something from my childhood that she brought up, and I've told this story many, many times, is that when I was a kid, I'm a latchkey kid from Iowa. I grew up with a single mom who was working two jobs. And I always dreamt over and over again as a kid that I would go inside my bedroom closet, Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, Disneyland. Everything that I ever wanted as a kid was inside the bedroom closet. Anytime I felt abandoned or lonely, I'd find myself in my dreams going inside my bedroom closet. Well, when you are 40 years later, you finally figure out the metaphor of the dream of being inside the bedroom closet is that everything that you want is already within sight of you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then
So that was, how old were you then? How old were you when that woman contacted you?
So I crossed over when I was 16, so I was 25 or 26 when she called me.
Okay, and then what changed as a result of that conversation?
That's just crazy. That's like, okay, it's time to step up and
Yeah.
get in the game.
I wonder, why do they have to call you at 1:30 in the morning? Like, they can't come at 4 in the afternoon.
Knock
It has
on your
to be-
door, you know. Right.
Yeah, that's a $1 million question, but it seems like all those calls come between like 1 and 4 in the morning for some reason. Yeah, and I've had more than one of those phone calls. She just validated kind of what I was told, and it was no longer, well, did that really happen? Maybe that didn't happen. Maybe I'm making it up. And so around that time is when the tone started to go through me. And so in August of 97 was the first time I publicly presented the vocal tones that were coming through me for about 200 people at the Religious Science Church Mastery of Life in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And after doing the tones for about 10 minutes or so, I was told, I heard a voice to say, stop and look up. And about 80 to 90 people, they were out, you know, kind of like when a hypnotist goes sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of what launched me speaking in front of people about my near-death experience and the sound healing, you know.
Okay, I need to understand something because so many people have a fear when they have, you know, gifts or abilities or whatever to step out and step in the light and be of service and do this stuff. So we went from this woman calls you to you're in front of 200 people sharing these tones. What in the world made you think that like you could step forward? And this is for the benefit of people listening about getting out there.
Yeah, it's not like one or two or, oh, let me sample this on, you know, a couple close
Practice.
friends. Right?
Yeah, that's what most, you know.
Yeah.
I was in Charleston at the time, and we were up at still there, the Unity Church on Leeds Avenue, and we were doing Reiki circle. Reiki. Do y'all know Rosemarie Swanson?
Yeah.
She was involved, and Bill Barley was involved, and some others. And I was doing. That's when the tone started to come through, and everyone was like, "Do that thing that you do." What is that? Because it was so profound, so captivating, and then we would have, people over at either Rosemarie's house or Bill's place, maybe 20 or 30 people, and just the results were the same time and time again. And then so then I ended up going
that. Yeah.
So then I ended up going to Las Cruces, where I went to graduate school, and I met the minister there and demonstrated what I did, and she's like, "You got to get on stage here."
Wow.
May I ask,
That's awesome.
What was your degree at Las Cruces?
Undergraduate, I have a degree in psychology. Then I went to graduate school in communications, persuasion and theory.
Okay, because I was just curious, like, oh no, I went there for English, or something like that,
so-
and then you're doing something totally different. So I was just curious.
Yeah.
So were you wanted to study that because of the stuff you had gone through? You knew that it was going to be like you needed to understand. I know I'm taking us off a little.
No,
No,
that's
good.
fine.
No, so one of my childhood mentors is Luis Vasquez, and he's from Puerto Rico. And around the same time, I got the phone call from the woman at 1:30 in the morning. It must have been within 2 or 3 days. I'm in Iowa. I'm literally getting ready to go back to Charleston. And both the lady that called me at 1:30 in the morning, and she says, "No, you need to go to Las Cruces." And then Louise calls me. I haven't heard from you years. She says, "Yeah, I don't know if you know this or not, but I just took the job as the associate professor of psychology in Las Cruces, New Mexico, at New York State University. If you need help getting in, I'll make sure you get into the program." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Because I was like ready to tell this lady, I'm going back to Charleston. And I was like, with 2 days later, he calls me and goes, "Yeah, I think you should come down here."
Wow.
So
Yeah, and just for the record, that's where we met Mark, was at Bliss Spiritual Co-op in Mount Pleasant, which is
Mount
a
Pleasant.
suburb of Charleston. And when Mark was referring to the Galactic Group, he's talking about our Charleston Galactic
okay.
Ambassador Facebook
Yeah.
page. So it is, I think, still a public
I
page.
think so.
Well, yeah, because he was saying Charleston, and I don't know if people, because between Charleston and Iowa is a big distance. So I kept thinking you meant Charleston, West Virginia, until you said Leeds Avenue.
No,
You guys are like nodding their heads, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, here,
Yeah,
okay."
right here. Yeah.
yeah,
So
no,
this year-
I lived in Charleston lived in Charleston twice from 92 to 96 and again from 2016 to 2020.
So if anyone is interested in furthering this conversation, this type of conversation, join the Facebook group, Charleston Galactic Ambassadors, and
Right.
yeah, converse.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're at Las Cruces, you're getting your degrees, you're presenting the toning, and where do you go from there?
So from 97 to 2002, in between going to undergraduate and graduate school, I did a lot of, especially like during the summer break, I spoke at a lot of unity and religious science churches from Southern California, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona for probably about 5 years.
So you're on the talk circuit. Sort of.
Well, from 2002 to, I want to say 2015, 2017, I was out there. Body, Mind, Spirit Expos, New Life Expos, Whole Earth Expos.
Wow.
I went on, 2011 or 12, somewhere around there. I went on just before Dolores Cannon at the Wake Up Now conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I presented with Lynn Andrews. So, I've really done a lot of conferences and expos.
That's
I
exciting.
had no idea. All I knew Mark from was our meetings at Bliss, and that he would play his sound bowl and tone for us, and that's all I knew of Mark. And now I know the whole rest of the story.
There's more.
So the other thread I want to pull is the Melchizedek.
I was gonna.
Piece,
I was just gonna ask that. Yeah.
We have a common friend by the name of Maria, and she mentioned to Will that there was a message from Melchizedek that Melchizedek would be working with Will and that he would know what that looks like. That was only a few days ago. So
maybe a week or so ago. Yeah.
And many years ago, when we were first doing Reiki on our children, Melchizedek came through and said that he was working with, or that energy was working with our children. But we really don't know a whole lot about it, except it's briefly mentioned in the Bible, I believe. And that
there's a couple of references in the Bible that says, which is interesting, because it says Jesus is like Melchizedek, and then it refers to that he was a priest in the order of Melchizedek. For something that I've always found interesting, because my father was a holy roller, and because I can quote the Bible with anyone. It's like we say that he is like Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan is better than, because you're comparing it to the greater one or the better one. So when it said that Jesus is like Melchizedek, was it implying that Melchizedek was in fact the higher priest, or the quote truer priest? So and there's the statue of Melchizedek outside of Wales. It is a priesthood that is considered to represent the Great White Brotherhood. Also, they seem to be in control of time. They like the time and space continuum.
Okay.
And
so
was Melchizedek actually a historical figure embodied then?
Yes.
Yeah,
that is correct.
And what would you say is the specialty then of that lineage at this point?
The lineage
evolution now
is the knowledge, the gatekeepers of knowledge, the gatekeepers of wisdom, is the emerald tablets, of Thoth, things like that. Of sacred knowledge, sacred text is largely associated with the Melchizedek order. And I know Trundlow. I've met him numerous times. I lived in Sedona for 15 years. He lived there. We'd always run into each other all places. I know Maria talks about Walmart all the time, but I'd run into Trundlow at Walmart or, the grocery store or whatever. But here's the story of how I worked with Trundlow for about 10 or 12 days.
And for those who don't know Trundlow, can you just give us a brief bio on him?
So Trundlow Melchizedek, back in the late 80s, early 90s, brought this teaching called the Flower of Life. He really brought the ancient teachings of the Flower of Life. I've been to Egypt a couple of times. It's the Flower of Life symbol is in Karnak, dated 22,000 years ago. His book is called The Flower of Life, and I find this information to be remarkable. about the real origins of man, the Anunnaki, the Ani, the division, the galactic wars. He talks about all that stuff, and I find his information really profound.
So continue with your story
Wait,
too.
I just have to say, I've been watching Gaia lately, Ancient Civilizations and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, I feel like I'm now in the interviewer position, like on the show.
Right.
Like, it is so freaking cool because I'm like, I want to ask the questions. And anyway, and now I'm just kind of going, I don't even know what to ask because there's so much. Anyway, I am loving this.
Yeah.
All right. So when I was in Charleston, Rosemarie Swanson gave me this is before Trundlow really got out there, the bootleg of the bootleg of a bootleg of the videotapes of the Flower of Life, which is about sacred geometry, Giza Plateau, the Sphinx, the pyramids, all that stuff. And I was working at 82 Queen
Which is
one
a
night.
fantastic restaurant in downtown Charleston for those
Yeah,
of you
thank
coming
you.
to visit.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little plug. So I'm there, and we have an hour and a half wait. I have a 6-table section. I'm in the weeds. I'm buried. And this guy and his family comes to he's in my table. And I'm watching these tapes this time. And as I'm taking his order, this voice, an angel, talks to me and goes, "We need you to talk to him about the videotapes you're watching." And I'm like, "You're out of your mind."
Where's the segue for that?
Right.
Right,
Yeah. Oh, by the way.
But I'm in the weeds. We have an hour and a half wait and 6 tables. I go, "No, I'm not doing it." And so I go to leave the table. I get physically pushed by an unseen force back in front of the table. And they go, "No, you don't understand. We really need you to do this." So I'm thinking, what am I going to say to this guy? What am I going to say? So I finally go, "Hey, are you a mathematics professor?" And he looks at me and goes, "What did you really want to ask me?"
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I go, well, yeah, I'm watching these videotapes about sacred geometry. He goes, "Trundlow, Melchizedek, you have those videotapes. Where did you get those videotapes? I have to have those videotapes." Like, great. Well.
Yeah.
So the next I go, "Well, they're not mine. I'll call Rosemarie and ask if I can give them to you." And so I call her and I go, "Hey, this dude is adamant those tapes belong to him. I mean, he's like, he wants those tapes. Can I give them to him?" She's like, "Yeah, sure, I guess. Why not? I've seen him all the time." So I call him the next day, say, "Hey, Roger, I can give you the tapes. When do you want to meet up?" So we meet up the next day, give him the videotapes. 3 months pass, I don't hear anything from him. I go to work one morning, and as I'm getting ready to open up, they come back to me and go, "We need you to go to your manager now and tell her that you have to go home." I'm like, what are you talking about? I just got to work.
Right.
They go, no, just say that you're not feeling well or something,
So they're giving you excuses.
Give me excuses, yeah. And so I go, "Hey."
Give me an excuse not to go.
I've had them say, put stuff away. Like, I've never had them come
Give
up
it
with an excuse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. No, angels are not normally known for doing that, right? So I go, "Stacey, hey, I'm not feeling well. Are you okay if I go home?" She goes, "Yeah, I don't think we're going to be visiting. Go ahead and go home." So they come back to me and they go, "Would you please go directly to your condo, your apartment? Please do not stop anywhere on the way back, on the way there." I'm like, "Sure, whatever." So I'm walking back, and back then it was a good 20, 25-minute walk from downtown Charleston. As I open the door, the phone is ringing. It's Roger, who I gave the videotapes to. He's calling me from France. He says, "Hey, would you like to work with Trundlow in person?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. What do I need to do? How much does it cost? And where's it at?" He goes, "Everything's been paid for. Thank you for the videotapes." And so, yeah, I got to spend about 12 days with Trundlow. That was when he was actually teaching the seminar from like 8 in the morning till 7, 8 at night. the whole program, his whole story, and the Merkaba meditation, and all those things.
Just tell me you got to do that in France.
No, it was
Oh.
no,
I
no, it was
icing.
it was actually close to up here. It was in Coke Crest, North Carolina, which is kind of on the Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina border. It's in the Smoky Mountains.
It's really cool because I love having these kinds of conversations because living here in the South, and you're saying, where were you from?
Iowa.
I'm from Iowa, originally from Iowa.
But you were around, okay. Growing up here in the South, like to try to find anything metaphysical, to try to find a group to bond with or anything like that. Like to me, I always said I was on a desert island. I didn't know who to reach out to, and it was so challenging. And I'm hearing you say, well, in 2000, whatever, I was doing this and I was here. And it's like neat to know that there were these pockets. I just needed to do my journey alone, but and a lot of people do. But I love hearing that there were these pockets of things happening in the South.
Yeah.
Of course,
I think that
might not have known.
Right.
I think that with all that's going on the planet right now, and everything that we're witnessing, people are going to be forced, whether they want to or not, to accept this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to go down that rabbit hole in a little bit.
Well, I was going to step back to the Melchizedek thing because as you're talking, it actually puts a lot into perspective, and now really intrigues me to start doing some research because one of the very first things that I did soon after coming into my awakening, a good friend of ours is a local medium and our local psychic, and I went to see her. And one of the very first things she said, I don't normally do this when a client walks in. I typically don't do a psychic. I went there for a mediumship reading. I don't typically do a psychic reading on someone as they walk in, but I have to tell you this. When you walked in, you presented psychically to her as like a priest, like
Right.
somebody, clergy, something, with the full garb on, the full robe, the head thing and the whole bit. And she said, I had to make sure I tell you that because otherwise they'd keep pressing me to tell you that. So then we went on about the session, and then another aspect of that was in that session, one of my guides that had come to her said that I will be making a trip to Egypt. This would have been, let's see, 2000
around 2015, 2014.
Yeah, so show around 2018, as she was saying, I was going to be going to Egypt. Never made my trip to Egypt, but I did make my way to the Middle East, or I had made my way to the Middle East at one point. And I will say that, how some people get off a plane and they say, I feel like I just got home, right?
Right.
Their native country.
Right.
When I stepped foot in, and this was Kuwait, when I stepped off the plane in Kuwait, I literally felt like I had stepped back home. And I was so comfortable in Kuwait, in Iraq, when I was on one of the big bases there in Iraq as a government contractor. I did not feel displaced there. I actually felt at home. So now with what you were saying, as far as, that the whole tie with Melchizedek and that priest aspect, or the priesthood and the Middle East and all that, now it all makes kind of a bit of sense, some linkage to why Melchizedek is in my presence. So yeah, now I have to definitely start looking into it for sure.
Well, if you ever do go to Egypt, they never say welcome to Egypt. They always say welcome home.
I understand. I understand why. Because though I have not been there, I had an opportunity while I was in Kuwait to live, as we would say, out on the economy. I was put up in an apartment, and I actually lived right outside of Kuwait City. I felt at home there. I would walk the streets by myself. I'd go to the grocery store myself. I'd go sit at coffee shops myself and just talk to, you don't really talk to Kuwaitis, but you talk to the expats that are there. And, and it's really interesting. It was very comfortable for me. So yeah, and I'm a 6'4", 200 guy, that doesn't blend in well over there.
Yeah.
No one sees you. You can't see me, right?
Exactly.
So I have a question, because we're talking about Egypt, and I wrote this down because I was curious, because you kind of got the math thing going on, right? This was on Gaia the other night. Do you know anything about something about there's 22 pyramids that have been found? Do you know anything about that?
I would guess that there's more than that. But,
okay, well, that's what my husband was saying too, but they were playing into a significance about these 22. And my brain, I can't remember why, but I remember it sticking with me and him going, well, they just haven't found the others, but there's something significant about the number 22. And
well, I just heard Robert Edward Grant, and he
it was
mentioned
him. It's his program.
his
on
show
Gaia
is
I was
called
watching.
Codex.
Yeah.
And he's amazing, brilliant, but he did say something about the 22 pyramids, and I don't think it means there's only 22. I think it means there's a certain
Something
22 that have some kind of significance
Significance,
that
okay.
are tied together or whatever. But
It's my understanding that the Great Pyramids were actually power sources, not only of our planet, but other planets throughout
Yes.
the galaxy.
thank you. Yes, because as you may or may not know, my next book, The Origin Story, I've talked to the 12 starseed source clusters that created our galaxy. And as I was nearing the completion of those channelings with those 12, Will gets this huge download in his sleep. And it was from the Council of Builders and Constructors. Now, obviously, this information needed to be in the book, or they wouldn't have been downloading Will with this information as I'm in the
Right.
process of writing the book. And they spoke exactly to that the pyramids initially were created by them, and they work in multiple galaxies, and they set up galaxies and planets, and they created them to draw upon and create the atmosphere for Earth. Then they were used throughout history. I'm giving away some good secrets in the book too.
Basically, they were
But,
throughout time they were taken
were
over and
repurposed.
repurposed,
Right.
just like we move into a house and we flip a
Right.
house. Well, civilizations find these big structures. Are like, oh, what's
Right.
this? I don't know, but let's make it a burial mound, or let's make
Didn't
it,
they do that in
something like that,
pyramids too?
Right.
Like they would
Yeah.
take the pyramids and they'd just build houses.
or build over the top of it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
they weren't built for when humanity already existed. They were built.
predate.
They were built for humanity, so that Earth could be habitable for
Which
humanity.
explains why
Right.
we can't figure out how all that stuff got moved and happened
Mhm.
by
Right.
mere mortals.
Right.
That makes a lot more sense.
It's my understanding they were created by sound and magnets from the top down.
That's very true, but a lot of people, I think, still think that we had ET perhaps assistance. The humans had ET assistance in that when humans were already in existence on Earth. But I think the misunderstanding is that it predated humanity. So
Right, right.
that's fascinating. I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Mhm.
It's like the guy down at Cape Coral, the little short guy from Yugoslavia or Latavia, the Coral Castle.
Oh, yeah,
This-
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the story is that he would tell truck drivers to leave the truck there. Here's $20, go have lunch. They would come back, and 30 minutes later, and all the stones were off the
Mhm.
truck. And these are like 2,000 and 4,000 pound stones. And here's this guy that's like 5'6", 5'5". They're going,
Yeah, how
you
did
know.
how did he get these things off the truck?
That's
How do
right.
you get
That's in
this-
Florida,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's
Maybe we
incredible.
should
Florida.
take a road
Yeah.
trip.
Coral Gables, you said, right?
yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So
A rabbit hole to go down.
the other thing I wanted to mention about Melchizedek is in the process of writing the book, I was just perusing YouTube and I came across one of Trundlow's old videos. It was a recent upload, I guess, but it was really, you could tell it was kind of an old video, and it might have been some of the conferences that you or trainings that you had witnessed.
Right.
Might have been somebody who had taped that. And it was like a 30-minute section. And in that 30-minute section, he was teaching the class how Earth was going to be wiped out, essentially. And what I understand, they're called resets. And humanity's reset, consciousness is upgraded and it starts over again from the upgraded consciousness. And I think it was in the 70s, if I'm remembering correctly, but that he had information that the Syrians had interceded on our behalf. And so I went into channeling and got some information around that. And it was just a fascinating. Drunvalo was absolutely correct, but it wasn't just the Syrians. There were a bunch of other groups that went to Source, or the highest council of beings, to advocate for humanity. And they came up with this ingenious plan to sort of put a net around Earth to deflect, the energetic waves that can wash over our planet that can cause a
Right.
reset. And it was able to, they said it wasn't quite to repel it, but it processed it so that it wouldn't
Yeah.
cause a reset.
I believe that's correct. And I think like in February of 72, Time had a front page cover saying that the Earth is about to be destroyed because of they were calling it solar flares back then. And
Yes.
so the Syrians and others suspended human free will for the first time in human history, and they created like a Merkaba living field around the planet because they thought that we were gonna be wiped out from solar flares or magnetic disturbances in the earth, and the experiment has been proven to be successful.
Yes, that's fascinating. So the channeling that I received validated what Drunvalo had been teaching.
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
When I was just listening to Blossom Goodchild's recording today, and they were talking about, I'm sorry, I just love how all this stuff dovetails.
Yeah.
But they were talking about, like she kept catching them when they were saying things that she thought was contradictory. And one of them was, it sounded like they had taken away our free will recently, like by them being involved now.
To
and
help
they were
us
like,
evolve, yeah.
Yeah, but they're like, no, this is different. This is necessary because too many have kind of run amok, and we need to kind of right things, just kind of stabilize it or something like that. It was an interesting.
Yeah, they didn't take it away. They just suspended it briefly to see if this was going to work or not.
Yeah.
That was neat.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Now, we have a lot more to talk about, so we're going to break here and bring Mark back for a second episode.
Sure.
Because we have a lot more to get into with regard to sound healing and toning and why humanity is going through what we're going through and what the purpose is and all of that good stuff. So stay with us, Mark, if you would.
I'll be here.
And we want to thank everybody who has been tuning in so far. Stay tuned for another fascinating conversation with Mark Patterson. Like and subscribe and share if you found this valuable, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us.
See ya.